My first time using a clicker. Thank you for coming. This is actually my first AWE, which is funny considering I've been at Oculus since pre-acquisition. I'm here to talk about play, one of my favorite subjects. This is me and the places I've worked and a couple of things I've shipped. I'm going to go pretty quickly, and I want to leave time for questions because I kind of bounce from high concept to practical. And it might be a little bit confusing. I hope not. So my team built some of the most influential playable VR experiences of all time. At Oculus, Toybox, Dream Deck, First Contact, BOGO, First Steps. They were inspirational to a lot of developers, I think consumers, and inside the company. The nicest thing I heard recently was kind of a backhanded compliment that VR content hasn't lived up to the expectations my old team set. And I think that's largely true, or else we wouldn't be asking why aren't people using headsets more. So who's this talk for? This talk is not for game developers. The universe of people making XR experiences is far broader than game developers. My clear bias is that I am a game developer, which I think is a discipline that's first among equals in informing the medium. I'll explain why. When I say things like that, though, if you're not a game developer, I expect that it engenders a moment of conflict, right? You're like, am I excluded between games people and non-games people? This is a divide that I think has existed inside the company, Oculus and Meta and Reality Labs. The main thing, I think, whether you're coming from video games or other forms of interactive development and design, is we all have a lot of things to unlearn. We're exploring a new medium. It requires a growth mindset, which means being humble, being able to be open to being wrong and learning new things. So in the early days, Oculus was very much a startup company. You just go and you build shit. Very few PMs got in the way. There was not a ton of bureaucratic approval. And there are downsides to that culture. Like if you're making an operating system, maybe that's not the best way to build things. But it was refreshing, scary, dynamic. Those cultural values were largely replaced. And I don't draw judgment to this. This is the way things are. But I'll never forget this moment when I was walked into a design review with the head of design for Oculus. And Figma flows were posted around the room in paper. Paper. And the design director is ex-Apple. I mean, who's going to tell him it's wrong, right? This is the way it is done, TM. How many people here have ever implemented a design that looked good on paper or an editor, and they put on the headset, and they're like, this is not good at all? Right. So my team was like, what the fuck? Like, how could we do this? So this is my point about game user experience. Every game design doc, when it meets the real world, is revised dramatically. And I think game UX accommodates a ton of player choice, user choice, that 2D UI does not. But that point of view is largely unrepresented in that room, those game people. Flash forward to my time on Project Nazare, which is the AR glasses that Reality Labs is working on. And I looked at this room of people making stuff, and they all wanted entertainment. They knew entertainment was a big use case. Makers who consume play but have never made a thing played by people. So my job is to try to bridge that gap, and I came up with a rubric that helped a lot of folks find common ground on what they were building inside Reality Labs. Maybe it's useful to you. So how many people here, I'll look at a show of hands, thought that games would be the forefront of VR adoption? Not everybody, right? What about AR? Do you think games at the forefront of AR adoption? No one's raising their hand. So this is the battle that has been fought inside Quest. This is not spilling tea, it's been talked about. Is on the one hand, we had people who wanted the Quest to be a general computing device. On the other hand, people who wanted it to be a games first device. There's a big fight, went up to Boz, Mark, we chose games. Apple's gone the other direction. I think Quest has been successful. The ecosystem has generated billions of dollars of revenue. And I think it's safe to say that when I left Meta, games was still a primary use case for AR glasses. VC Fund just published a thought piece about MR and non-gaming use cases on top of gaming use cases as being the promised land of like massive adoption. I think that is true, but you still have to get through the gaming use cases. And gaming seems like such a loaded term, like it seems bro-y, like Call of Duty is a game, but so is Rock Band, so is Plants vs. Zombies. So I land on the word play, and there's two reasons why I think play are important. One of them is conceptual. How do people learn about a new domain? I race bikes on a velodrome, pedals. And the people I do it with, we're all pretty serious. Like, we train 10 hours a week. We get out there, we bump elbows at 30 miles an hour. But we say we're playing bikes because the consequences aren't the same as being a professional when your paycheck depends on it. And think about children. How do they learn the world? To them, play is a serious business with lower consequences than real life. Specifically, that's a conceptual, high-level stuff. Specifically, though, consider what MR does well. It presents a synthetic reality that behaves as expected, which is itself complex, right? Think about a cup. All the things a cup can do. It can hold water, it can hold liquid, it can be thrown, it can roll. A ton of things that a simple cup can do. And then you expect it to be magical, right? Because it's not just replicating reality. So what are the things we can play with? These following slides aren't designed to be like hardcore definitions like Mel Slater or Furness would write a paper on. They're intended to be a lens to think about the work you need to build and your expectations around them. These things have different costs, different engagement and retention models, different audiences, and possibly different likelihood of the viability of software. I'll say that the only real medium that is successful in VR today is games, and not for lack of trying. Oculus tried a ton of different things. Productivity, fitness is becoming a thing. But games is still, the market has spoken, games are it. Props, statues, balloons, toys, puzzles, games. These are the 4 things you can build, and I'm gonna skip props because props are primarily decorative. They're minimally interactive. In an AR testing we had, there was a little statue of an otter, and people loved it. But I was like, well, why does a user care to have a statue of the otter in their room? And they're like, I don't know. It's cheap to build, and it's seductive because it's cheap to build. But why they do it, why someone would use it, no one could answer. So let's skip props. Toys, puzzles, games. Toys, right? You're a bunch of adults in this room. I hope you haven't forgot what it's like to play with toys. But toys are unstructured and open-ended. Action figures, dolls. Like, I don't care if you're a boy or girl or non-binary, like, you played with dolls. Cardboard box. It's in the Toy Hall of Fame. No explicit goals. There's nothing to solve. There's no logical start. There's no logical end. There are no rules. Some toys do lean on a rule, like physics, slinkies, balls, but there's no wrong way to play with a ball. Without explicit goals, there's no drive to complete it. It's all expression, right? You can make up all the rules you want, but it takes mental energy to make up these rules. The bouncing ball can give rise to lots of games, and when those rules are formalized, you can emerge with things like basketball. But without external drivers, agreed upon goals, it's all on the player to self-generate. What audience has the time, the imagination to make up rules and play with toys? Children. Is there a software toy that fits these categories that you can think of? Is that a successful industry? Puzzles. I call puzzles fun problems because when you solve unfun problems, that's work. And partially because the consequences for failing to solve that problem is pretty serious, right? So we play puzzles for fun, Rubik's Cube, crossword puzzles, jigsaws. There's a start and there's a finish, and those are the states you care about. There are inflexible and discrete rules. Consider the way Rubik's Cube moves or the way jigsaw puzzles fit together. There's one way, that's it. Challenge is high. Expressivity or imagination, low. The journey isn't the point. Only the destination matters. And we love them because they are hard, right? In many ways, puzzles are the opposite of toys. The more jigsaw pieces you have, the smaller they are, the harder it is. But what happens when you get stuck? Like, do you go online and say, like, how do I solve this jigsaw puzzle? You kind of give up. And it has the least agency. The decisions you make as a player of a puzzle aren't memorable or varied. Either you're on the right path or you're wrong path. No one describes like how I solved the Rubik's Cube in a minute, which when I was young involved actually oiling the cube so I could do it faster. Games. Sid Meier had a great definition of games. He called it a series of interesting decisions. I'm no Sid Meier, the designer of Civilization, so I'll call this something much simpler. Games are a series of interconnected systems for a player to explore for no other reason than to explore. Games are the only software that gives the user its goals, right? Any software you use, you bring your goals to it, right? I want to share photos. I want to like stalk my ex-girlfriend or boyfriend. I want to write a document. Like, you bring your goals to software does it. When you start Mario, the software says, go rescue Princess Peach. And you're like, I'm in. The only software that does that. It's a thing you also do for entertainment and enjoyment. It sounds funny to say, but it is an art form. Carmack disagrees. I think he's posted a whole thing about games are art. I'll like respectfully disagree with him. Examples of games: Settlers of Catan, Super Mario Brothers, poker. Poker's interesting because it adds a little more money component, so maybe a little bit outside. But like puzzles, and unlike toys, games have rules and therefore challenge and explicit goals. Unlike puzzles, games have a broad range of meaningful interactions, decisions to make. Sid Meier's definition. Those actions, at their best, have consequences in the system, and the variance of player choice leads to drastically different experiences. Anyone here play Baldur's Gate 3? Surely you must have. Right, like, how many ways are there to defeat the giant robot mech statue, like the owlbear, massively weight increase, jumping off a high thing, doing 10,000 points of damage? Like, people have lots of interesting ways to solve that. And the goal is emotional, not functional. It is to have fun. There's a whole thing about fun, but that's the broad range. Games do something else really unique: the ability to get good at an adaptive pace. There's a concept which I recommend everyone read. It's called self-determination theory. It posits why human beings do things, and they do things for 3 reasons: autonomy, competence, relatedness. Autonomy is I get to make meaningful decisions. Competence, I get better. Relatedness, I have a relatedness feeling with other people, other creatures. Games do all those things, and note, prior to computer games, games were always something you played with other people. Computer scientists will recognize Conway's game of life. How simple rules give rise to unpredictable outcomes. I was talking about the Baldur's Gate 3 combat solve. I guarantee you the designers didn't think that that would be possible. And I think games are some of the hardest software to write because they embrace emergent behavior. Emergent behavior is unpredictable outcomes from simple systems running together. Like, I guarantee you, no one at Amazon wants emergent behavior when it's one-click buy. Like, one-click buy works that way every time and only that way. Games, exactly the opposite. So I started this talk by saying this taxonomy isn't rigid. The lines between toys, puzzles, and games aren't hard and fast. They're all forms of play. Lego is a canonical toy for me, and yet Lego really hit success, another point of success, when they started shipping kits, when you could build a Millennium Falcon or a Hogwarts or whatever, right? It gave a goal for this set of blocks, and all of a sudden it became a puzzle. A toy can become a game by adding multiple goals or rules. The Sims is a dollhouse, but it's a rich simulation layered on top of this dollhouse. It's the fantasy of my dolls came to life, right? But this comes at a cost of expressivity. In a child's mind, a Barbie can have any value he or she imagines. Barbie could be married, could be single, could be transgender, could be a superhero. All in the child's head. But in The Sims, that's not possible. They're no longer infinitely expressive. They're still a expression. But what you get for that is the simulation recognizes these different goals and states, and the world acts accordingly. Puzzle can become games by adding multiple goals. I worked at PopCap. Bejeweled is one of the great games, casual games of all time. It's a match-3 puzzle, which changes all the time and has multiple goals and multiple ways of scoring and multiple combos. Everyone's played Wordle. Wordle is a puzzle turned into a game. Puzzles can become games by stringing them together. This is Portal. Portal strings them together by having a unique theme and a narrative that runs through it. I drew this last night. So on the left, on the y-axis is like a 0 to infinity thing. You can tell my UX designer didn't do this and should probably like, Bernie. And on the y-axis are all these things that were talked about, the terms challenge, expression, and goals. It helps us see them compared. And this, I think this visualization confirms what we already know, what I know, is that games have immense power to captivate people. I suspect commercial success mirrors this. So what's stopping us from all making games? It's hard. It takes a lot of time and expertise. So this is an informal poll of how long it took to make these things in VR. My team made a paper airplane. It took weeks to figure it out because it is far harder than you think it is, right? Like hand tracking, intention, velocity, physics of the airplane. You can play them in First Contact. I guarantee you the physics is completely faked. Escape room and rec room. It takes months to build one, a good one. Play test, iterate, try again. Any modern game takes years. So there's an obvious path. Do the thing that worked before. Let me ask another question. Raise your hand if you think first-person shooters are better on VR than on console. 2 people, 3 people. I will say that I don't think the market shows that, right? If it were, we would be playing Destiny in VR because it would be a better experience. The durable form of entertainment makes unique affordances of the medium. So when I started at Oculus, I learned something from the Valve guys, Altman Binstock, who had been at it for years before we even got there. And he said to me, don't do the obvious thing. Do the non-obvious thing. Toybox was a social VR prototype that we built. Mark spent a ton of time in it. It was a bunch of physics objects and toys with 2 people. 60 prototypes were made before we got to this. So what does XR play? The power of VR, as per Mel Slater, is not necessarily to reproduce a faithful reproduction of reality, but rather offer a possibility to step outside the normal bounds of reality and realize goals in a totally new and unexpected way. So this is First Contact, and I'll give you like my model for VR development, and I think this is true for XR. Anybody see the movie The Prestige? Christopher Nolan movie about magicians? So there's 3 parts to a magic trick, he says. The pledge, the turn, the prestige. The pledge is, here's a coin, it looks like a normal coin. The turn is, I've made it disappear. The prestige is, it's in your pocket, right? Everything my team has ever shipped, and if you look at other great VR experiences, they do the same thing. The pledge. The turn. The prestige. Please don't make another chess prototype. Chess is a game that you can play in MR, but it is not an MR game. This is the Unity demo, which I think is the best user experience researched demo because it uses what MR is kind of good at, right? There's a physical surface that gives you feedback. The objects can turn from 2D to 3D. I would argue this is still not a game that will sell because computers went through this once before. We had chess games, we had battle chess. Now, the only thing that really exists of the original chess games on the computer, real-time strategy games. Like, that is a direct evolutionary descendant of chess. Games are full of environmental storytelling. A level's art direction tells you how you should feel about a place. A ruined office with dark recesses, flickering lights, a warmly colored forest clearing, a long hallway leading to a vault door. Those places have meaning. They tell you how to feel and how you should act. Is your home any different? Your sofa isn't just a semantically tagged object. It has emotional weight. Every place in your home does. To me, this is the grand challenge of what MR game development is. Semantic and emotional meaning. This is a quick peek of what we're building at my startup, Wind Up Minds. We're building a virtual pet. First time I've showed it in public.
Hey, you want to come up? Come on. Yeah, good girl. Good girl.
I'm here representing my team. Thank you for all the work. That's me, and I've got 3 minutes for questions. Yes.
Questions? Who's got a question? Over here.
I said some pretty controversial things, so I hope people like, Bernie, you're wrong.
Is this working? Yes, it is. So, sorry. I remember that you said that first-person shooters would be better in VR.
Sorry, say that again?
That first-person shooters
Are not better. I claim they're not better in VR.
Oh, same. Never mind.
Right. That's not to say that there are not a lot of successful games that have made money for that are first-person shooters in VR. There clearly have been, but not at the level of a Destiny or a Halo or a Doom or Call of Duty.
I wanted to ask, so coming from traditional game space to the mixed reality or VR space, you talk about the 3 steps or the 3 things to like kind of open up, start smaller and kind of have that wow factor of like, whoa, I can interact like this. But in traditional games, there are many games that are derivative of each other, and it's just I did this game but better. In the VR XR landscape, is it still about novelty above all else, or is there room to be like, I made this guy's game but better, a better, different in the same genre,
I mean, I believe that we should be moving the medium forward. I don't think novelty is a bad thing. I mean, I think novelty implies triviality, and I don't think that's true. And I think the market, it becomes saturated, right? Like, how many more, team-based shooters do you need? How many can the market support? I think the answer is we've peaked at those, right? So I think if you want to build something new, there's a really good article about understanding the system map. Will Wright gives it. He talks about optimizing for the local maxima, right? So if you're iterating on a thing and you get to the local maxima, but the system maxima is far across the map. Like, how do you get there? I don't know the answer to that question, but I think, to me, the golden age of XR is when we understand the system maxima and not the local maxima. So, but that's a risky business proposition, right? I can only give you sort of the systemic view of there is experiences out there that will far outstrip the commercial power of what exists today. I think we all believe that. Well, how we get there is on the backs of failures, unfortunately, but I think we have to get there.
Hey, Bernie. Right here.
Hey.
I work at Twitch, so my question is, why do you think we don't see more XR streaming to sites like Twitch?
Oh, that's a good question. I think partially it's the technology. I actually want, for the one thing we're building, I think we have to stream to Twitch because, virtual pets is a subset of pets, and pets is 10 billion views on TikTok, and everyone loves to see goofy pet stuff. I don't know. I think part of it is the technology. I wish there was a share button like PlayStation has, share live. The UI on Quest is not conducive to this, and it's been on the roadmap for since 4 years. So I wish they would fix it. But I think that's really important. And the other thing too is you have to feel it sometime in headset. You gotta know, right? I can guarantee you, as fun as my pet looked, it is 10 times better in headset because you feel like she's sitting next to you. So
We should talk then, if you want.
yes, let us talk.
For sure.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for questions right now. So give a hand to Bernie, please.
Thank you.